Live on MaxDefender8.com, here's the Max Defender 8 weather team.
All right, everybody. So you know what, Eric, move over just a bit.
Yep.
So you can get more on the screen. There you go. So both Chief Meteorologist Jeff Berardelli, Meteorologist Eric Stone here, talking about what could potentially be a very serious scenario unfolding for the Bay Area. We're not trying to scare anyone, but this is kind of, if it takes the center part of this track from the National Hurricane Center, would be about the worst-case scenario we've seen in over 100 years in the Bay Area, honestly.
Yeah, we're looking at a possible major hurricane making landfall really close to Tampa Bay area, if not right in Pinellas County. So, again, the miles really matter whether this takes a more northerly route, a more southerly route, or stays right over top of us, Jeff. So, again, very important in regards to storm surge especially.
So, timing would be, we'd start to see tropical storm force gusts Tuesday night.
Late Tuesday night,
yep. And then the worst of it would be Wednesday. Right now, timing for landfall is 2 p.m., but it could be 11 a.m., it could be 5 p.m.
Right, exactly.
It could be within 6 hours of either way, that window. So why don't I start the show right here, and we'll go through some of the graphics. So, Eric, people are probably wondering, what the heck happened here? Because a few days ago, it looked like we might see a tropical storm. Maybe it would be a low-end hurricane, but then something happened, and it came from the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, it's called Tropical Depression 11, Eastern Pacific, right? Not the Tropical Depression in the Atlantic. And it crossed over the extreme southern tip of Mexico. So it didn't really have too much land to disrupt it. I mean, it did disrupt it some, but it still kept that circulation going. And once it hit that warm water of the Western Gulf, it just really blew things up.
So basically, this was a seed that came from the Pacific Ocean, and it already had some spin. So originally it looked as though it would just be thunderstorms in the Western Gulf that may or may not be able to kind of get that spin and begin to spin. But instead, that depression from the Pacific came into the Western Gulf, and it already had spin, so it was easier for it to get going. And here we are, what seems to be a low-end tropical storm right now.
Right, and you know what? A lot of people are confused about what we were looking at in the Caribbean about a week ago or so. That is actually rain that's going to hit us tomorrow here in Tampa. Really no wind with it, and that never developed as we figured it wouldn't. This is something totally separate.
So that's, because I think a lot of people are going to ask, what happened? I mean, last week this wasn't going to be a strong storm. Now it looks like it possibly will be, and it's that. We are still getting the disturbance that could have eventually turned into something, but isn't going to, and now it's the thing behind it that's causing problems. So as of 5 o'clock, and we'll get the latest advisory at 11, but wind's just 40 miles an hour. It's moving very slow, 3 miles an hour, and it's going to move slow through about Monday night, Tuesday morning, and then the jet stream's going to dive south, pick it up, and the Southern Gulf, I'm going to show you the water temperatures, but they are record hot. Never been this hot before. And because it's going to be scooting to the south of the wind shear, as we see, Eric, it really could even become, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that becomes a 4 for a time in the Southern Gulf.
And how many times have we seen the models actually underdo what really happened, right?
Right.
We just saw that.
Or the hurricane models pick up on the intensity, not the global models. And we have seen some hurricane models predicting that at some point it could be a 4 in the Gulf. But it probably wouldn't stay that way. I want to make that clear. It's unlikely it would come on shore as strong as it is on the Gulf because it's going to start interacting with the jet stream. We're going to be talking a little bit about that too. But there you go. Landfall would be sometime Wednesday afternoon. National Hurricane center of the cone right over Tampa. We know from living in Florida that cone never stays exactly the same. It shifts north, shifts south. So prepare for those shifts back and forth for the next day or two.
Yeah, exactly. And, it isn't going to encounter some wind shear. So the good news is we may have a weakening storm as it makes its way onto land. Helene was a strengthening storm, which does more damage.
Yeah, and, it's not just a little, I've noticed in my career. Storms, let's say they have the same amount of wind from the National Hurricane Center, storms that are strengthening, they have that upward momentum, they carry the wind further, they cause more damage further inland, and they always cause more damage at the coast. Storms that are weakening always produce less than you would expect.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you have a weakening Cat 2 or strengthening Cat 1, the Cat 1's going to be stronger. Right? Going to be stronger. Yeah. It's going to produce more damage. Storm moves pretty quickly by, and so that by Wednesday night it's gone already. Spaghetti models, this is an interesting shift. Earlier today, the consensus were south of Tampa Bay. This would not be good for Tampa. We don't want this going north of Tampa Bay. because then everybody gets hit with storm surge, right, Eric?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we don't want it going north of Tampa Bay unless it goes way, way north of Tampa Bay, like in the Big Bend area.
And we don't want to go in there either.
No, we don't. I mean, we're not wishing this on anyone.
We're not wishing this on anyone.
But I mean, as far as the least population and the better scenario for storm surge for us, obviously the further north it went, if it was going to go north, it'd be the better.
So the most storm surge we've ever had was 1848. It was like 15 feet of surge. Of course, there may have been more surge before 1848, but we can't go any further back. Second most surge was 103 years ago. 1921 storm hit Tarpon Springs as a borderline Cat 3, this is what it's predicted to be.
Right.
That produced 10 to 12 feet of surge in the bay. You can imagine if that had made landfall like Madeira Beach, well, then the bay would probably had close to 13, 14 feet of surge. Anyway, the models have shifted north a little bit. We don't know if this is a long-term shift or not. Those are the hurricane models. These are the 12Z, the morning runs. I didn't want to update them for the 18Z models. To be honest with you, a little inside baseball, 18Z runs are usually not quite as accurate as the 12Z, so I wanted to keep it that way. So, and just keep in mind that the models have shifted a little further north. Not the European, though. European's exactly where it was. The 18Z European is pretty similar to what the 12Z was, but these are the 12Z runs. And, you see the American model, European model right over Tampa Bay. That'd be a worst-case scenario for us. But here's the thing, and we're going to show you scenarios soon. You'd literally push this storm a couple miles south of Tampa Bay. All of a sudden, you shut off the water into Tampa Bay, and it's the difference between 10 to 15 feet in Tampa proper and no water in Tampa
water
proper.
being taken out of the bay.
Right, just by simply, instead of the storm making landfall, like,
St. Pete
Beach, it makes landfall in Longboat Key, or even Anna Maria Island, and all of a sudden you have a lot less surge.
Yeah.
But that's the range. The Icon's been a very good model. Would track this year, and the last one had it going through Northport. I haven't checked the 18Z.
I think
it's pretty similar.
Yeah, it is.
It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the steering flow. So the jet stream is up near Chicago right now, but a piece of that's going to break off. But it's not going to get into the Gulf until Tuesday, so it moves really slow, the storm, from Sunday to Tuesday morning, but then it gets picked up by the jet. This is the problem, right? We don't know how far north the jet's going to pick it up.
Right.
And what we also don't know is that jet stream interaction, that wind shear interaction, going to weaken it? And we think probably.
Yeah, I would say.
I think it's hard to imagine that when the storm gets lifted north, it doesn't start weakening as it moves north. So I have a little bit of confidence in the fact that it shouldn't be as strong. And most of the models do show really strong over the, over the middle grounds, over the loop current, and then weakening as it heads towards the coast. But it's still, the models make it a 4, the hurricane model, so it's a 3 when it gets here. It's still,
right. Yeah, it's still a major hurricane one way or the other.
So there it goes. Watch it lift now because it gets captured by the jet stream. By the way, we are going to be taking your questions in just a couple minutes. I just want to get through a couple more graphics, and then we'll go back and forth, and we'll have graphic explainers to talk about it as well. This next one shows the Gulf, where you see the blue, and you don't see any blue, are temperatures that are below normal. Where you see the red, temperatures are above normal, and right now we are at record levels in the Gulf. Not just for surface temperatures, but also for ocean heat content below that, so the depth of the heat, too.
And a lot of people asked, didn't Helene cool things down? Well, it was moving so fast. It didn't really have time to.
Yeah, and of course, it cooled it down a little bit, but it still
came right back.
Still, water temperature is still supportive of a major hurricane. It's not like it cooled it that much. All right, wave heights. Now, this is one of the things. You could get a weakening storm like Katrina is a great example of this, right? Katrina was a Cat 5 and a strong one in the middle of the Gulf. And then it weakened to a Cat 3. It barely had Cat 3 winds, but it had Cat 5 surge. Right. So that's the problem, right? You can weaken the storm as it moves to the coast. It's still going to retain the same amount of surge to some degree. I mean, the surge will weaken a little bit, but barely, because it lags, right? Everything in the water lags. Water temperature lags. Waves take a little while to go down. So let me show you the wave height forecast across the Gulf. See those 20-footers, 30-footers, 40 to 50-footers just off the coast as this storm comes in on Wednesday. 50-foot waves don't reach the coast because the Gulf is very shallow, but the Gulf accentuates, because of the continental shelf, the amount of surge that we tend to get here.
Yeah, but still those waves are going to translate. They're not going to be lower substantially with a weakening storm, right? Like you said, they're going to continue to push
with
on
momentum,
shore. Right, it's going to have that momentum of a higher cat storm than what it might really be.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about storm surge, and I think we should preface it with this. If this storm makes a direct hit on Tampa Bay or goes just north of Tampa Bay, With a Cat 3, we're looking at 10 to 15 feet of surge inside Tampa Bay. Now, you might think to yourself, and when I moved here a couple of years, I lived and worked here in the late 90s and in the early 2000s. And I left for a while. I moved to Miami and was a weather person there in West Palm too. And when I came back a couple of years ago, I started looking for condos on the water. And I said to my wife, we cannot buy a condo that's below the second floor. So it has to be at least the third floor. And the reason I bring that up to you is, if you're on the second floor, most people on the beach are going to think, I'm okay. The water's never going to get to the second floor. But we saw with Helene that it got to the first floor and it was a few feet of surge, right? If you add another 4 or 5 feet, and that's possible, we could see, if in a worst case scenario, we would see double the surge of Helene. Right. Helene had 7 feet, so conceivably, at most, we hope it would be 14 feet. Well, that could get to the very bottom of the second floor of some buildings on the beach. And I bring that up because I've looked for condos, and I've looked to see how some of those condos are still, the second floors are still like, only 12 feet above the water line, or 15 feet above the water. It's too close. We're telling you that because there are going to be people that are not going to want to evacuate, even though they saw Helene, and even though even though they're told to evacuate, people are going to stay. They always do. Just know that you're not safe even on the second floor if we get a direct hit.
And all you have to do is look at Ian. I mean, you look at the beachfront properties in Fort Myers Beach area, and easily halfway up the second floor. I mean, that was 18 foot of storm surge, but I mean, you're not really technically safe unless you're on the third floor, and that's from storm surge. Then you got to worry about the wind as well.
Right. So we would just recommend that everybody just heed the warnings. If you're told to evacuate, please do so. Again, it's early for that, but I just want to go through some scenarios. So storm surge scenario 1: the storm makes landfall somewhere, in Pinellas County, just north of Pinellas into Pasco County. This is a worst case scenario because it pushes water directly into Tampa Bay, and it's worse for almost everyone, with the exception of areas that are south, or areas that are north of the storm itself. But you can see it affects everyone. And again, it's got to go somewhere. It's going to landfall somewhere on the West Coast. Yeah. So what's the worst case scenario? It hits Indian Rocks Beach, or it hits Madeira Beach, and now you're forcing all that water right into Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and I mean, we already saw some of that with Helene.
Right.
So now we're going to have the 1-2 punch, and here comes yet another one. So the other, scenario would be this to be a little bit more to the south, right?
So
And then what would happen is the water would be pushed away and out of Tampa Bay, so it would actually benefit our Bay Area. But folks to the south, from Sarasota, Siesta Key, Sarasota Beach, all the way down, once again, toward Fort Myers Beach, would get the brunt.
That's right. So there's no great scenario to this situation. We've seen with Ian, we saw the water be pushed out of the bay. It was like 6 feet in certain places.
It was crazy.
It was 6 feet plus of water that was pushed out of the bay.
It was completely dry.
I mean, in some places you could walk for a mile. And not hit any water. So that's a best case scenario for Tampa Bay. But as Eric mentioned, if it hits, let's say, Manatee County around Bradenton, well, that's a worst case from Bradenton and Anna Maria Island, or Longboat Key south through the beaches all the way down to Port Charlotte, and even Fort Myers Beach. Gets it bad too. So there's no great scenario, but that's that situation. Okay, let's talk about rain, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, I would say, a good 8 to 12 inches, although most of the rain, it's interesting, I don't recall seeing too many storms like this where most of the rain is to the north.
But Ian.
Yeah, well, Ian was. Yeah. But this is a north-heavy storm, in regards to rain. So if this moves to the south, we may not get as much storm surge, but I think we get 8 to 10 inches, maybe even 12 inches of rain.
Right.
If this moves to the north, we get the storm surge, but then we may only get 4 to 6 inches of rain.
Or less.
Or even less than that.
What we're noticing on the models, and this is an interesting meteorological phenomenon, but as the storm interacts with the jet stream, all of a sudden all the dynamics lift to the northern part of the storm, so we get all the rain there, and heavy rain. So if that happens to be, the storm goes through Pinellas County, well, the heaviest rain is on the Nature Coast, Newport Richey, Citrus County, and maybe Cedar Key. It's really interesting, but most of the models do show that, and with Ian they showed that, and they were right. If you remember, there wasn't much rain south of Fort Myers, but in Northport, in Sarasota County, up through Hardee and DeSoto counties, there was like 20
and even Orlando,
20 plus inches of rain, because all the heavy rain was on the north side of the storm. Just one more graphic. This is a little climatology for you to show you what's going on here. During the month of August, there's a big Bermuda high, and we have this steering wind. It's clockwise wind around it, and it pushes the storms westward towards the east coast of Florida and towards the western Gulf of Mexico. But this time of year, the jet dives to the south. and you get that westerly steering flow. So anything that develops in the Gulf moves our way, which is why October is our most vulnerable time of year. So I'll tell you what. Why don't we take some questions? I'm going to refresh the page, even though I see them coming by real quick.
Yeah.
And I have so many more graphics in here, Eric. I have a graphic in here that shows the record storm surge that we had. In fact, let me see if I can find that. Oh, here it is. Let me just pull it in. Let me pull it in, and I'll pull it up just so you can see. So we're getting really unlucky here. I think the folks can see this at home. Let's pull this down a little. Okay. You should be able to, in a second, see this graphic. So there it is. So the Great Gale of 1848, 15 feet of surge. The 1921 hurricane hit Tarpon Springs as a marginal Cat 3, 11 feet of surge, which is what this would be if it hit Pinellas County. We would have 10, 11, 12, maybe a little more surge, depending upon how strong the storm is when it comes on shore. In third place, Helene, which, by the way, was 9 days ago?
Yeah. So it wasn't that long ago.
So, if we get 10 feet of surge, whatever it would be, and Idalia was last year, and it was the 5th highest surge we've seen from a hurricane or a tropical system in Tampa Bay. So, talk about bad luck the past couple of years, if that's what it turns out to be. Okay, so why don't we so Aaron says every time Polk County seems to get hit every time. You know what? Can't rule that out, because if it comes through Tampa Bay, it would move through Polk.
Right. Polk's so big.
It is a bit. It also is a very big county. Yeah, that's a good question. Good point. So Ashley wants to know about Manatee County. So again, I'm going to bring up this graphic just showing all the different tracks. We're so early in the game. We're Saturday. This storm's not coming till Wednesday. So Eric, I don't have a gut feeling on this necessarily.
I don't either. I did with Helene, but this one, it's kind of hard to tell. The latest run of models have brought this a little bit further to the north, and you just wonder, is it going to keep on going?
Or is it as
look what Ian did. Ian started way to our north, and then it went way to the south. Is the jet stream going to be so strong that it picks this thing up and really, really takes this north? The telling tale is when this thing starts to make that northeasterly turn, then I think we'll get a better idea.
Well, you know what? Let me show you. So I'm going to bring this up. Look at the wind shear. So you notice how for the next couple of days it's way south of the wind shear. Okay. So the wind shear is affecting it a little bit on its northern end. Now notice sometime around Monday, Tuesday, it starts to get picked up by not the wind shear, but the trough.
Right.
You can see a dip. You see the arrows dip down, pick up the storm. That's the critical part, right? How far do they pick the storm up? Does it pick the storm up to Tampa, or does it pick the storm all the way up to Cedar Key?
Right.
Or does it not pick it up as much and it goes into Sarasota?
Yeah.
We don't know the answer to that question. I think it's. We should check.
I was just going to show. Yeah.
Let's check this. So this is our in-house model, and it's been showing pretty rapid development. Now it did that with Helene, and it was a little too fast with development.
Right.
It was right about the track. It was right, I think, to some degree about the eventual intensity of the storm. But it was a little too fast to develop.
Yeah.
And I think
this develops fast.
This is too fast. But it goes to show you what the possibility is. Here it is Tuesday. It's also a little slow.
But it's very far to the south compared to the other models. So
it's to the south. It's probably developing it too fast, and it's too slow in moving east. But look at that core. Now, one thing we should say, this is a much smaller storm, at least initially, than Helene was. So that helps to some degree, right? Because Helene pushed so much surge in because it was such a big storm. But if this hits directly, we'd be right under it. But this kind of shows you the potential. That's a core of, these are gusts, by the way, but that's a core of wind gusts to 125 in the.
Yeah, that looks very similar to Charlie, doesn't it?
Right. Well, yeah.
In size, but again, it's still early. Remember, initially, Jeff, Helene didn't appear to be forecast to be a huge storm. So.
Well, that's what's going to happen here. So this will be a small system. You'll look at it and say, "Wow, that's really small," until it starts to interact with the jet, and then it becomes a much larger system as it moves in, because that's pretty typical of systems that interact with the jet. All right. So Cliff wants to know about Pasco County, and let me just show you. So it's worth showing you this. Earlier today, the black lines, which are the consensus models, they were south of Tampa Bay, right through Sarasota, Northport area, right?
Yep.
And then the latest runs,
that's a huge difference.
The 18Z have moved it close to Newport Richey, the consensus, or Tarpon. So, again, we don't know if that trend will continue north, if it'll correct south, if it'll stay there, we don't know. But, everybody on the West Coast, the West Coast is going to be a catcher's mitt. It's going to catch it somewhere. We just don't know exactly where it's going to catch it. Could it possibly go to Martin County? You know, my mom lives in Martin County. No, it's not likely. It could go to Martin County, which, by the way, is Stewart and Hope Sound, that area.
Right.
But if it does, it'll be a severely weakened storm. And by the way, if it takes the southern track through Fort Myers, it's likely to be a weaker system,
Right,
at least from
definitely.
what we've seen, probably. Yeah. I mean, can't guarantee that one.
Yeah, my friend Barry in the chat asked about Fort Myers again. The further north this goes, it bodes much better for Fort Myers, especially since the rain's going to be well to the north, and then the storm surge will be a little bit further away. But there's still going to be storm surge yet again at Fort Myers Beach, as there was with Helene.
Yeah, I'm just watching these questions come in so fast and furious here. Let's see here. We're getting political. I'm seeing a lot
I know.
we're not going to address any of your political comments. Sorry, we really have to. Stick to
we'd rather keep you safe.
As much as I can be, as much as I am entertained by the political chatter, I think it's better that we talk. So someone's asking about Winter Haven. So if the storm goes from Tampa Bay north, Winter Haven's likely to miss out on the heaviest rain, I think. If it goes south of Tampa Bay, Winter Haven's going to get the swath of heavy rain. Obviously, you're not going to get any storm surge. But if this is a Cat 3 when it comes in, you should expect hurricane force wind gusts in Pasco County.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, something we should mention, if it moves through Tampa Bay, it's going to create extensive widespread power outages. And it's going to not be a couple of days. For some people, it's going to be a couple of weeks before power comes back on. At least. So you're going to need to take precautions. I'm going to tell you some of the stuff I'm already talking to my wife about. It's early for this, but you should already have your hurricane supplies topped off. If you don't go tomorrow, top them off. Just do it. Make sure you have gas in your car, okay, because you might be asked to evacuate. Make sure you have a plan and you discuss that plan with your family. Make sure you know your family knows where you're going. You know where you're going. Get all that stuff together. What I've been talking to my wife about is this. I'm going to fill our bathtubs with water. I'm going to do it because look what happened in North Carolina where nobody has water now. Right. I want to have water for a couple of days after the storm. Let's say something happens and the water line breaks. Something happens, we lose water. So you want to make sure you have water to drink, more importantly than anything, and all the necessary supplies. But beyond that, you might want to fill your bathtub with water so that you can do the necessary things you need to do if you happen to stay and you don't evacuate. Not everybody's going to be evacuating. Shutters. Somebody's asking about shutters. Yeah, everyone's going to have to put shutters up if it comes through Tampa Bay, but it's way too early to talk about shutters, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, my buddy in Punta Gorda was asking me, and he said, well, I have to either do it tomorrow or not do it at all. I said, well, be cautious, put them up if you have to do it tomorrow, and then you got to work the rest of the week. I mean, it's better to be safe than sorry, but yeah, it's still kind of early for that.
Felicia asked what zones in Pinellas County should evacuate. We don't make that decision. That's made by the emergency managers. So I would just listen to them. They tell you to evacuate. If not, then stay. We try to encourage people not to evacuate if they're told not to evacuate because it clogs the roads up. People are going to issue, if they issue evacuation orders, and it's early. Again, we don't know for sure where this is going. But if they do, they'll probably start issuing them Monday.
Yeah, and that's when the hurricane warnings will start coming up Monday.
That's right.
48 hour or watches and warnings 48 hours before.
Helen wrote, people, this is not the place for politics. That's right. We're concerned about the safety of loved ones. She's exactly right. That is true. Really, because we have important stuff to talk about here. Amy says, what's the effect on Orlando? Well, if any of the past storms are a good judge, then Orlando, for some reason, is going to get hit again.
I know.
I mean, it's just you send people to Orlando, and then it moves to Orlando. But it's always a weaker storm. They don't have to deal with the surge. Yes, power outages. Yes, gusty winds. But the further inland the storm goes, the weaker it's going to be.
But we did see all that inland flooding with Ian. Although, I mean, that was 20 inches of rain. So you're probably not going to get that with a more fast-moving storm. But a lot of people are asking on the East Coast, Flagler, Melbourne, Daytona. Keep in mind, if the storm goes south on the East Coast, then it is going to blow some storm surge in if you're north of the storm. Right, so again, it wouldn't be as much storm surge as we'll see on this coast, but still, that would be an issue. And it's moving so quickly that by the time it gets to the East Coast, it's still maybe at least a Category 2 or strong Category 1 storm.
Yeah, so there'll be widespread power outages. So just keep in mind, what do you need if you have power outages? Well, all the food in your freezer could spoil. Maybe you need to go out and get ice and have a cooler. So just start thinking proactively about some scenarios in case it comes your way. Again. Just to reiterate, if you're just coming online here, this is the latest forecast track from the National Hurricanes. Tropical storm now. winds 40 miles an hour. At the moment, it's forecast to move somewhere in that cone. Could be anywhere. Could move through Naples. Could move through Cedar Key and the Big Bend of Florida. But right now, the center of the cone is Tampa Bay. We always tell you don't pay too much attention to the center, although it's hard to not pay attention when you live in the Tampa Bay area. But remember, and we saw this with Helene, and so everyone's already learned this lesson, the impacts extend well outside of the cone itself.
Definitely. Yep. And what do we say? It's about 30%. 30% of the time, the storm will actually go out of the cone 4 to 5 days out. So
and I don't think that's going to happen this time.
No, I don't think it's going to. I mean, I think it could be on the edge if it does take that northerly track.
Yeah.
But
and obviously the further north it goes, the less surge we get in Tampa Bay.
Right.
But we don't wish.
And probably could be a stronger storm, but with the wind chill, we'll have to see.
So going back to this graphic, the last time we had a Cat 3 that made landfall in immediate Tampa Bay area was 1921, and during that storm we had 11 feet of surge. During Helene we had 7. So I think a worst case scenario for a Cat 3 would be we get double the surge, so 14 feet, if it hits perfectly the exact spot.
If it's a Cat 3.
Right, it's the Cat 3. Yeah. Because the 1921 hurricane was barely a Cat 3. Winds were like 115, 120 miles an hour. That's what this is forecast to be. So let's see here. Palm Harbor. Greg asked about Palm Harbor, and Jackie asked about Zephyr Hills. So Zephyr Hills, further inland, you're still going to have those very strong wind gusts, though, as the storm moves onshore. Palm Harbor, if you're near the water, pay very close attention to whether or not you're told to evacuate. I don't know where in Palm Harbor you are. Palm Harbor's kind of big.
Right.
And there are some people who live on the water in Palm Harbor. And again, if it moves through, let's say it goes through Newport Richey, well, Palm Harbor gets smacked with the highest surge with that storm.
Yeah, and not to be morbid, but most of the people that did unfortunately pass away from the last storm, Helene, at least along the coast, were people that were told to evacuate. So if you're being told to evacuate and you don't, you're risking your lives.
Yeah, and again, this is the worst case scenario. This is kind of the track that the 1921 hurricane did, ended up moving onshore around Tarpon Springs. That exposes everybody in Pinellas County, and obviously down into Manatee County and Sarasota County too, but then funnels that water into the bay, to the apex of the bay. Now, the way it works here is you would think the beaches get the most surge, but that's not true necessarily. Actually, the highest water would be, unfortunately, at the tip of Tampa Bay. Where would that be? Davis Islands, Harbor Island, downtown Tampa. Where is the station? In downtown Tampa, along the Hillsborough River. So that's where the water gets funneled in. During Helene, we had about 2 feet of water that surrounded the station.
At least. I mean, I think maybe even 3 foot at times.
Yeah, I walked through 2 feet.
Yeah, you and I walked through 2 feet of water.
There was 3 feet in certain places. In front of the station, it was like at least 3 feet of water. Too dangerous to walk through, for sure. Yeah. So that's the worst case scenario for surge for people that are just tuning in. And let me show you what wouldn't be the worst case scenario for Tampa Bay, but would be a worst case scenario for southern areas, from Manatee County south or Sarasota County down to Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda. Is a situation where the storm moves, makes landfall just south of Tampa Bay around Longboat Key. Now you're forcing the water out of Tampa Bay. And it's really interesting, Eric. I never did the measurement, but I imagine that the mouth of Tampa Bay is about, 5 miles wide, 10 miles wide. I don't know. I'd have to, but it's and I don't know. I'm sure someone smarter than me knows the answer on here. The reason why I say that is this storm makes landfall in Fort DeSoto. Wow. Big surge into the bay.
Yeah.
This storm makes landfall Anna Maria Island. Wow, not much surge.
Yeah, I mean, a 10, 15-mile difference.
Just literally the span of the Sunshine Skyway, and of course a little bit more than that because you would go from like Egmont Key all the way down to Anna Maria Island. Don says he lives in an evacuation zone in St. Pete. Now it's gone. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Worst case for Safety Harbor storm surge. That's a good question. Safety Harbor, you're at the apex of the bay there.
Yep.
And 10 to 15 feet, I think, would be a worst-case scenario for Safety Harbor.
And even if Milton is south, like you see right here, water is still going to be pushed up into Shore Acres and St. Petersburg. If you live in eastern Pinellas County, so I mean, somebody is going to get storm surge, but it's not going to be nearly as catastrophic as if this was further to the north.
You know what we learned from Helene? If you remember in Helene, and we were a little bit surprised that. Even like hours before the storm came, even before the winds were onshore, we already had flooding everywhere in Tampa Bay, and we had a southeast wind in the bay. In Ian, we had a northeast wind. So I think that when you get a northeast wind, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Northeast wind forces all the water straight out the bay.
Right.
Okay. A southeast wind doesn't do that. It's not a worst case scenario. Southeast wind still funnels water out, but as you mentioned, certain areas see the water pile up in a southeast wind. Because again, that water's being
like
pushed.
Oldsmar, Town and Country. I mean, the water that's there is being pushed onto shore.
That's right.
Not additional water from the Gulf.
Whereas a northeast wind just literally
takes
all the
everything
water.
and is gone.
And I don't know how we get into a northeast wind because you'd have to have the storm.
This would have to be down. This would unfortunately have to be another Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to move through Sanibel, Boca Grande, that area. Not great. Tara wants to know about Manatee County. You know, the further south you go, I think the more you can plan on to search.
Right.
Right. But you know, if we get a storm that goes through Hernando County, well, Manatee County is not going to see as much surge as they did in the lead.
Right.
This also shouldn't be as big of a storm as we mentioned before in terms of its girth.
Yeah, so it's really, and I see a lot of people continue to ask, you know, how about my city, how about my town? But, you know, a 10, 15, 20-mile jaunt in one direction is going to totally change everything. So, I mean, you know, the broad perspective is it looks like most of us are probably going to see at least tropical storm force wind and the potential for hurricane force wind gusts, depending on how strong this gets and how close. So you definitely want to plan on a wind event and the possibility of a rain event if, you know, you're north of this storm.
So somebody just asked if they should go to Georgia. You know, they basically said, I think they may have said they live in Brandon. I don't know. Or maybe I'm getting two questions mixed up because there's so many questions.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to send, you know, assuming this looks the same Monday morning, I'm going to send my wife to the East Coast of Florida because her grandmother lives there. So I'd recommend that people go to places where they have friends and family because it's not going to be that easy getting a hotel. And oftentimes it's best if you can be with friends and family, you go. How far do you need to go? Look, I could send my wife to the East Coast. She probably will still be hit by the hurricane and probably get hurricane force winds, but she's not going to get the storm surge and she's not going to get Cat 3 winds.
Right.
So the thing is you're not necessarily sending them to a place where they're going to be, you know, they're not going to see any impacts. And I don't think you need to go to Alabama.
Right.
You know, I think that if you went to the East Coast of Florida, you might get power outages. You know, and there might be some superficial damage, but it's not going to be the damage we see here on the West Coast. So again, I don't think you need to prepare to go to Alabama. You might want to if you don't want to be anywhere near a storm. But remember, these storms weaken pretty markedly once they move on land and move, even if they're moving fast. You know, Polk County may not be safe there because we saw with Charlie, although Charlie was a much stronger storm.
Right.
Than we think this is going to be when it makes landfall. We hope.
But you know, if you went into Southeast Florida, at least, you know, look at how the models are you know, trending over the next day or 2 days.
West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, Miami.
And if everything seems to be going, you know, to the north, then you might want to go to Broward County or Miami-Dade, you know, somewhere in the southeastern portion.
Even West Palm, you probably be okay.
You know, with Ian, didn't your wife go to Orlando?
She did,
I think,
but she was in a hotel.
Right. So
but she got hit.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that. There was flooding around her hotel in the area, which was.
But the wind wasn't as strong.
But Ian moved slowly. This is not going to be moving slow. So as Eric mentioned before, I don't think we're going to see the 20-inch rain totals. We may see 10, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But there's a big difference between 20 and 10. And it's not just 10 inches. It's a lot more flooding.
Well, and we saw the 20 in Sarasota, and that was Debbie. That wasn't even a hurricane.
Let's see. Thank you for your dedication. Ty says, I know Ty. I think
he
works here.
Yeah, I think he's in the other room.
Right. I think he's.
Wow, what a nice guy.
Well, Ty, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, if you want to talk politics, he's the one to talk to.
Yes, he's the person to bring politics about, not us. Melissa wants to know about Clearwater. You know, anybody lives. So here's the thing about Clearwater I find interesting. Whenever we get the strongest wind gusts, they're in Clearwater or Bel Air because it's elevated by you ever go to the Intercoastal and you're kind of going by Bel Air Bluffs. I mean, they're the mountains of West Florida. They're not exactly mountains, but they're elevated a little bit. And downtown Clearwater is too, because if you have to go. So there's a park right in downtown Clearwater. You have to climb up a hill to get to the downtown. So it just depends on where in Clearwater you are. Obviously, if you're Clearwater Beach, well, you might have a big problem here. You know what I found interesting, and I think it to be true. There's a lot of people on the beach right now who already lost everything, who are like, you know what? If we're gonna get a hurricane, might as well be right now, because I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
We interviewed someone on the news a couple of days ago. That's what he said. He goes, "Bring it on. If there's a hurricane coming, that's fine. I have nothing to lose. I lost everything on the first." Problem is, if this storm comes on shore as a Cat 3 directly into the Tampa Bay area, it's going to affect those same people.
But also
plus
different ones.
a whole lot more people
who
didn't get water during Hurricane Helene. But I understand where people are coming from, because they're like, you know what? We already have a ton of damage. We haven't replaced our refrigerator yet. We haven't replaced our stove yet. You know, our car is totaled.
That's
this
true.
if we're going to get another hurricane, it might as well be now.
And
I
don't want to look at it this way, but insurance-wise, you're not going to receive your claim in 9 days or 12 days. So if this comes through and it's the same damage, maybe it's a better chance that the claim will go through.
And I also don't want to see what happens to the insurance market after this year, because it's look what happened in North Carolina.
After Ian, though.
Look what happened all across our area with Ian. And I don't know if you saw the 60-minute special. I don't know if you saw.
I didn't see that. No.
It is just crazy that they exposed what was seemingly fraudulent behavior. Now I don't know because I'm no expert in it, but it's hard for people. There are still people trying to get money for Ian, and it's been years. So this is obviously you do worry about that stuff. But first we have to worry about getting through the storm and making sure everyone survives and everyone's safe. And then we can worry about what happens afterwards. But I always do tell people, getting through the storm, as long as you listen to what we say, as long as you do what emergency managers tell you to do, as long as you're just practical and reasonable and use common sense, you are going to be okay. You are going to survive this storm. We are going to get you through this storm. As long as you listen to what we tell you and you do what we tell you to do. It's what I worry about for those people who do heed what we say is sometimes you're without power for weeks. Elderly people, don't have power for weeks, causes a real problem. The one good thing about this storm is when it leaves, Eric, for the first time in a long time, we're going to get cooler and drier air.
Yeah. I mean, rainy season looks like it's going to be just about shut off starting on Thursday. I mean, low temperatures, Jeff, 65, 66 degrees. Yeah. We haven't seen that in several months. So
and this is the only good thing about October hurricanes.
Right.
Is they're almost inevitably always followed by cooler, drier air, which people need because a lot of people lose power and don't have air conditioning. So just to let you know, it's not much of a silver lining, but it's a bit of a silver lining.
It's better than losing power with Helene, where the feels like temperatures are still 105 degrees after that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. That's the problem. I mean, and that's the problem with any summer storms like Hurricane Andrew back in '90. It's just hot afterwards.
Yeah.
Gabrielle wants to know how far inland the storm surge can go. Well, a mile. I mean, it can go that far if it's very flat. Usually it's only a few blocks.
Yeah, a half a mile, but I mean, Fort Myers Beach was pretty close to a mile.
Yeah.
But that was like worst case scenario.
Alex says he's in Lithia. Lithia is far enough inland, so you wouldn't have to worry about the storm surge.
Yeah.
Debbie says maybe Alabama would be good. Listen, if you want to go to Alabama, I get it.
Go I-10 and just go west of Tallahassee, and you'll be well away from this.
Someone just asked about Valrico. Valrico being
Brandon,
just east of Brandon. I think you're going to be okay, and obviously you're not going to have storm surge, but you're going to have power outages. And one of the things that we have to worry about is the Tampa Bay area has a lot of old trees.
Right.
And, by the way, a lot of old infrastructure that's untested to wind.
Yeah.
Most places like Fort Myers, they've been challenged by the wind already, and they've rebuilt more resilient. Tampa Bay area has a lot of old homes and a lot of untested infrastructure and a lot of old trees that haven't been tested by 100-mile-an-hour winds. So you do worry about that. If you're in an area where you're exposed to a lot of big trees around your house, you may want to think about leaving, because we see this too often where big trees will fall on people's homes.
Yeah. Whether they're rotted or on the inside, you don't know. They're dead trees or old trees. And like Jeff said, if we haven't got hurricane force wind gust, and those trees, once they experience it, bam, they're
there's
they're
a
down.
lot. I mean,
you saw what happened in Georgia, the Carolinas. There was a lot of that, even in Tallahassee area.
Drive around South Tampa, around the High Park area. There's a lot of old trees there.
Yeah,
beautiful. They're what really makes the neighborhood so great.
Right.
But if 100-mile-an-hour winds come in, some of those trees are not going to survive, unfortunately. Well, you're going to have to leave probably decently soon to do the 10. But I guess we can just keep taking some questions until, let's see here. Inland flooding. Natalie wants to know about inland flooding. So we've had a lot of rain. I want to show you something. Again, I seem to have a graphic for everything. I love making graphics. It's one of the things I like doing with my job. Let me see if I can. I updated it a couple days ago, so everybody bear with me. Eric, maybe you can filibuster while I'm trying to.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had quite a lot of rain this summer, and rivers. We saw the Alafaya overflowing, and I do think it's going to be an issue with this, even inland, especially with 10, 12 inches possible. But again, that's if you're on the northern side of the storm. If you're on the southern side of the storm, you may not see much rain at all.
It's really interesting. looking at some of the models, they're so top heavy that all the rain is on the northern side. There's barely anything on the southern side. So don't be surprised if something weird happens. These October storms, they interact with the jet stream and they morph into a different type of, almost like they're going through an extratropical transition.
Yeah.
So take a look at this graphic. Tampa, and this doesn't include anything we've had in the past day or two. But up at Friday, there was 64 inches of rain, one of the rainiest rainy seasons we've ever had, more than double last year. And then Sarasota's even worse. And, we had poor Sarasota.
Thanks to Debbie.
And remember before Debbie, there was that crazy flood in downtown Sarasota where it was like 12 inches of rain, 10 inches of rain. That was like a 1 in a 800-year flood or something like that.
And that was just a rainy season day.
Yeah, it was just a regular. And then Debbie came and flooded so much of eastern Sarasota County. And then, of course, in Tampa, we had those 2 thunderstorm days where we had tremendous flooding in St. Pete and Tampa, where there was like feet of water on the roads. Val, who was one of our colleagues here, she has, to this day, and I'm not kidding, some version of PTSD when it comes to flooding. She's so scared. She got stuck in the water for a little while, and so now.
Well, I know what that's about. Yeah.
And so Eric can tell you he was in that, of all places to be. Yeah. Last year you were stuck in that Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, 20 inches of rain in 6 hours. And my car was parked.
26 inches of rain in total, right?
Yeah, it was 26 inches of rain, and I went to a pinball tournament at a bar that had pinballs, and all of a sudden the water, and they're elevated by 3 feet. The water started coming in, and I'm looking at my feet playing pinball, like, what is going on here? And the water was coming in all directions. They shut everything down, and there were 1,500 cars that were stranded. Unfortunately, mine was one of them.
His car was totally
crazy. Yeah.
So talk about a weatherman being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But so Sarasota County has had 67 inches of rain at Sarasota Bradenton Airport, and that's again not including the last 2 days. Right. I don't know how much we've had, if we've had any, or really just the past day. But last year at this time we had 22 inches, so we've got triple last year, and 25 inches above normal, and so the ground just cannot take any more water. So whoever gets the rain, and hopefully it's not Tampa or Sarasota, because you certainly don't.
Yeah, a lot of people ask about Lakeland. I mean, I've got good friends in Lakeland. I'm there all the time, and definitely tropical storm force wind. And really, it all depends on the trajectory. If this storm moves more to the south, then Lakeland could get 10 plus inches of rain. But I mean, if it follows the trend of the models, which is slightly to the north, you may not get that much rain at all, and it may just be mostly a wind event.
People are asking, and oftentimes we see people asking about their sound. Winter Haven, Polk County. Yeah. See a lot of Polk County folks, Davenport. Again, I think part of this comes from the fact that every storm seems to somehow end up going through Polk County. Right. And we don't know exactly where this is going to go yet, but if a Cat 3 made landfall in Tampa Bay and moved across Polk County, you would have extensive power outages, a lot of trees down, and and there would be damage. There would be damage. It wouldn't be Cat 3 winds. It'd be Cat 1 winds with Cat 2 gusts.
Right. Lakeland has the potential to be Cat 2 wind. If it in the perfect scenario, but still over 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts are possible.
I've heard that water can travel through waterways and canals 15 miles, and so I get what you're saying here. Yes, like for instance, the Alafia River, water gets forced into Tampa Bay. It can be forced up the river and cause. And
it is all the tributaries of rivers and whatnot. Those flood because of the storm surge into Tampa.
We're getting a note here. It's okay. You can people can see the. What's that?
There's no update until 11 o'clock tonight, so I'm not sure what he. Yeah. What? Yeah. He wanted. Yeah, I sent him an email.
Well, as soon as we finish the stream, we can get some graphics. Yeah. So as you can tell, we're multitasking here. We have some shows coming up. We also want to make sure that the web has the latest information on our website if you want to read articles. And we're doing this this joint session right here. So, I think we're going to take just 5 more minutes of questions at the most, and then probably call it a night. We're going to be on at 10 tonight on the WB and CW. Sorry,
CW,
it used to be there.
I know, I remember that. It used to be WB.
And then we'll be on WFLA on News Channel 8.
As soon as the football game's over.
By the way, following News Channel 8, we're going to give you what is probably going to be bad news, but then you can watch SNL, and that will lighten you up a little bit and make you laugh, hopefully.
Right.
Just,
they're in New York, so they don't have to worry about this.
Right. Yes, so Cheryl wants to know if there's a chance for tornadoes. Yes. Somebody just asked about Inverness. You know what? Our latest models, I'll pull it up just to show you that, it didn't look like this earlier today, but the latest models, the consensus, are a little bit further north down to the Nature Coast. So Inverness could see. It's not out of the question that you could get a direct hit. Now you're inland. You're not in Crystal River. We'll see. We don't know the answer.
Now, it's interesting. With Helene, we had several tornado warnings, but I don't think we had a confirmed tornado, did we?
You know what? It's like a fog of war.
Yeah.
It's like the fog of war. So he's asking about whether or not we had confirmed tornadoes. I think there may have been one south of us. So
Okay,
maybe
that's
DeSoto
right,
County.
south. Yeah.
Problem is, I say the fog of war because when you have a hurricane coming through, how do you even know where the
Yeah,
you can't even tell where the tornadoes are. So there probably was, but if you already have 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts and a small tornado hits your neighborhood,
it's not going to be much more.
You wouldn't even know the difference. Yeah. Annette wants to know about flights. That's a great question. Flights into Tampa Tuesday. I'm going to guess maybe in the morning. A lot of times they like to get their planes out, right?
Yeah.
And just clear the airport. So it's a tough call.
Yeah.
This is what I always do. If I think there's going to be weather, I'll preemptively book the day before or the day or 3 days later. And we don't know. I mean, what's going to happen to the airport if it hits directly? It would take a while.
I think you'd be okay early in the day. Maybe early in the afternoon, especially since the models have kind of pushed this a little bit, toward Wednesday afternoon landfall. So
the latest from the models is somewhere Wednesday afternoon. Earlier today it looked like more of a Wednesday morning situation.
Right, yeah.
But either way, it's gotta hit somewhere. The best case scenario, Eric, is that the jet stream gets it early enough so that it weakens the system somewhat substantially before it gets here. Some of the models do show Cat 4s. But then weaken them to Cat 3s before they get here.
Yeah, and this does appear to weaken before it makes land rather than that, rapid intensification as it gets to land.
It would surprise me if it kept intensifying right up to land.
If it did, Jeff, it would be a Cat 5 if it did.
Yeah.
But
So
I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah.
Given what's happened in this country.
Yeah, Wednesday morning to Orlando, that's going to be a little dicey.
Sun City Center. You're located just east of Ruskin. You're inland. I don't think there's any Sun City that is exposed to the water, but you're pretty close to Ruskin. Ruskin, I am concerned about flooding, obviously, near the water
as it did.
of Ruskin. But Sun City Center, you're far enough inland, so you shouldn't have to worry about storm surge. But obviously, you do get the strong winds because you're really close to the water. Leslie says he lives in Clearwater. Yeah, I mean, again, a big difference between downtown Clearwater and Clearwater Beach.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've about exhausted a lot of the questions here because we don't know really any specific details.
Right.
11 o'clock on Channel 8, we're going to get the new cone, the new track from the National Hurricane Center. We'll see if anything changed. Right now, we're starting to get some of our zero-Z computer models, so we're going to look at that. So at 11 o'clock tonight, we will have all the latest information. We'll have the new computer runs. We'll have the new track, and we'll have hopefully some new insight into what's going to happen here. All right, everybody, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I just want to assure you we will be doing this a lot. We'll probably do this at least 2 to 3 times tomorrow, once in the morning. I'm assuming, Eric, if you can get to it in the morning for a short time.
Yeah.
We'll do it again late in the day. I'll come back in. We'll do it again tomorrow evening.
Yeah.
And then obviously we will be extensively covering this on TV. Not just tomorrow, but more so as we head into Monday and Tuesday in the system.
Yeah, and I'm sure JB and I will be, pretty much wall to wall, answering questions and
probably
trying to keep
Monday.
you guys safe. Yeah, definitely starting on Monday.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm going to put the thank you up, and then we will see you on air tonight on News Channel 8 at 11 o'clock.